to regular programming, essentially, of the Tuesday videos on the Bearfoot Miniatures channel. I'm going to be going over today the FAQ that dropped for Heresy. Basically while I was away, which is why I didn't cover it at the time. If you want to know what I was doing, there is another video released on last Tuesday, that basically says what I was doing in December, as well as what is going on in the channel going forwards. And I had a bit of a think, do I want to cover the FAQ and erratas when I got back? Now, it might be slightly old news now, but I thought it might be useful to just go through and give opinions on it. It might be something that people haven't said. To be honest, I've not watched any other videos on the FAQs and stuff like that. All I've done is talk about it with people in my group, so hopefully I'm not retreading old ground. So I'm only going to be going over the stuff that's new for this FAQ. Not going to be going over stuff, obviously, that is just in the FAQ in general. So first we get one of the biggest changes, I think, for a lot of the game. This is the base rulebook changes that we're going over first. Seemed like a good place to start. And we get to the reactions. So basically, when you make a shooting reaction, you can only use a shooting attack and can't use special abilities that happen in place of shooting attacks. Now, this, I think, it actually is a massive blow to Mechanicum. Like, other than Myrmidon spam, Mechanicum aren't the greatest army out there, and not being able to do your Cyberthurgy or even Battlesmith, like more importantly Cyberthurgy, I know it specifies Battlesmith, but Cyberthurgy is such a massive thing for the Mechanicum that being able to chain it through doing return fires is a big blow. Now, it's obviously trying to clear up Biomancy and Biomancy spam to get up to these ridiculous strength and toughness levels. And it achieves that. Whether or not it needed that additional nerf of just all shooting replacements, maybe it could have been more specific. You can't do psychic powers specifically. Or maybe just an errata to the actual psychic powers like tables, like Biomancy. Maybe it could have just been that to solve the problem at the actual point that it was a problem, rather than the base mechanic of the game that then has other knock-on effects that, like, I'll give it to them, it's probably intended, but I'm not sure it was entirely needed, because I'd never heard anyone complaining about people getting Cyberthurgy powers off for their robots for the entire time I played Heresy 2. So next we get reactions in the assault phase. Essentially, you're doing your reaction after charge rolls have been resolved for the first. So unit 1 declares a charge on Unit 2. Unit 1 rolls for the charge. Unit 2 doesn't have to have made the reaction. Now, this is different. It actually nullifies a bit in the reaction for Hold the Line, where if the unit fails the charge, you get a different effect from Hold the Line, which is... So essentially, if that charge is failed, you get to then choose whether or not to do the reaction. This has the knock-on effect to the Hold the Line reaction, where the actual wording is that if you hold the line to a unit that's failed a charge, all other charges are disordered, not just that one unit that goes in first. So actually you could see multiple units charging your one unit that's going to hold the line, wait to see if it succeeds or fails. You can then choose to do a shooting attack if it fails and it's the only one going into you. And if it fails and there's multiple, you could be like, oh, I'm going to hold the line and then get the disordered charge against charging Unit 2 and charging Unit 3. So it's actually a really big change in some situations. Whether or not it needed to be changed, I don't know. Not sure this was one of the changes that like we were crying out for. So next, to the bottom of the page, we get the dangerous terrain change. Now, this is a model is only required to make a maximum of one dangerous terrain test during a phase. Subsequent tests are assumed to have automatically passed. Now, I'm assured by James, who you might have seen on the channel playing Raven Guard and Iron Warriors during Heresy 1. Go back to Iron Warriors, James. Go back to Iron Warriors. He assures me that this is a massive boost for Dark Furies. What I think it's more is just a bit of a nerf to basically the Death Guard having dangerous terrain in their own deployment zone, having the... God, what are the grenades called? The grenades that Death Guard have that cause dangerous terrain checks, and also slight debuff to the Dark Angels Rite of War. Again, whether they were needed, it might have been a bit annoying to lose. Dangerous terrains happen quite often. So I'm not sure it was something at the front of my mind that needed changing. Maybe some people are having a much worse time with dangerous terrain than I was. But it wasn't something that I particularly thought needed changing. So next we have Crew Stunned, vehicle that's a zooming flyer, must move its move characteristic and cannot turn. Basically clearing up wording, I think. It's a good change to have. Yes, that's what I'll say about that one. A good change to have. Now, Graviton Pulse, we get, instead of rolling to wound normally with this weapon, any model without the vehicle, dreadnought or automata unit type instead suffers a hit from the weapon with this special rule, must roll under its strength on a d6 or suffer a wound, counting a 6 as a failure. Yeah, just clearing that up. I suppose it might have been errata, but I'm sure that's how we were at least playing it around here. Maybe that was just a hold up from Heresy 1, and although we were playing it how it is now, maybe it was just that there was some sort of wording error. Haywire, now this is a real good change, I think. There's a few units that have a lot of Haywire, and a few units that have mixed, especially Mechanicum, mixed automata and character units. Iron Warriors as well, with the Warsmith joining definitely Iron Circle, but any robots that you want, and Forge Lords being able to join units like that. There was then confusion over what Haywire actually did to that mixed unit. Could my Warsmith tank it on his 2-up, because he's not he's not a model that's affected by Haywire? So did I then take a strength check if it was allocated to him, but I don't allocate it to him until armor save, and this just entirely clears it up. Essentially, if you've got one vehicle, dreadnought or automata in the unit, you follow the Haywire rules. So it's much harsher against mixed units. But usually your mixed units are dominated by automata anyway, rather than like the regular infantry. And I think it's a really good change. These the start of the good bits of the FAQ. So next we get independent characters in Infiltrate. Basically, independent characters can join a unit that has Infiltrate but isn't infiltrating. The independent character can join them. Excellent. I think this has been going on for years now. Like, can it do that? And finally, we get the paragraph to explicitly state it, that they can join, because why would they not be able to? So it's a real good change. Next, we've got Shock Pulse. Any model with vehicle, dreadnought or automata suffering a penetrating hit or unsaved wound may only make snapshots during its Von Trolling player's shooting phase. Funny spelling mistake in an FAQ, but it is what it is. I don't think it's a big change. It's just it must just be clearing up wording, because someone tell me if that's not how it was before. And again, with the Graviton Pulse, do tell me if that's not how it was before, because I'm sure it was. So finally we get onto the FAQ section. Now, this is something that we all conflate, or like, maybe not all, but like a lot of us conflate an errata with an FAQ. I'm much more in favour of big FAQs than I am errata, because an errata is obviously changing rules that are already established. FAQs, which then gets a bit of a nightmare to keep track of. Like, replacements of the core rules. I mean, they do a new edition for most games every 3 years. We don't need a big errata that often if this is going to be every 3 years we get base rules of the games changed. Not that I particularly want that, but whereas FAQ isn't changing anything, it's just clearing up what that rule meant, and then you can just remember it and still refer back to the rule book, knowing what that rule then means and is intended. So what have we got, really? We've got vehicles can't attempt rams on reactions. That's good. A few of the big things, though, is there a limit on number of optional detachments? No. So that means the armies where you sort of have an allied detachment, and then you bolt on some Titan Guard, you bolt on a Night House, and whatever else, all that is legitimate, cleared up there. So wacky multiple full Sorg army builds are a go, essentially, if that really floats your boat. We've got, can wounds spill out of a challenge? Like, so a Primarch allocating hits, as it says in the rulebook. If they allocate hits, can they allocate out of a challenge? No. Which just makes perfect sense to me. Like, that's how we were sort of doing it here, but I know it had been a question, so it's good to have that in an FAQ. Just, if it is ever a question, get it in an FAQ. Done. Flamer's not affected by being further away due to gear, like Shroud Bombs or the Alpha Legion trait. They're not great. If you replace a mastercrafted weapon with another weapon, does it have mastercrafted? No. Brilliant. And that's really the real big changes, I think. Or not real big changes, but the real big things in that FAQ and the main Heresy rulebook. I think I'm mixed about it, really. I think some of the changes were needed. Definitely Biomancy needed to be addressed. I'm definitely happy about that. Whether it needed to be in the way that it is, I think the jury's out on, because how Mechanicum is now going to operate, I think is going to be much more of a struggle. And I do think they were already struggling against Marine lists when not falling into, like, Thanatar or Myrmidon spam. So next up, we've got the the Liber Astartes, which is the Loyalist Legions book. We've got the Deathwing Companion detachment, change the third sentence to essentially the same sentence. The actual operation of the rule, I can't see any difference with. It's 4 up against shooting, 5 up against melee, an initiative reduced by 1 for an engaged model that the unit's in an assault with. I can't really see a difference. Next, we've got the Sagyar-Mazan effects. So essentially, the Sagyar-Mazan Karash rule doesn't apply to unique characters. So, I really don't want to butcher this name, but Chinsar doesn't get affected by the Karash rule. I think it's a good change. Being able to score kill points when necessary is good, and especially for a special character where it should hurt if you lose them. I think that's a good change, good clear up, because they're not part of that specific detachment to be able to take them, or at least in the story. I mean, they're not part of that force that should be gaining the Karash special rule. Next, we've got a generic change that is in both of these Liber Astartes and Hereticus, because it's obviously in the book. We've got the Chaplain Consul upgrade. Can you mastercraft a Thunderhammer, essentially, because it's listed under power weapons? No, we now have a set list. Power Sword, Axe, Maul and Lance. And I'm sure that's how we all knew it should be, but wasn't. Like, it didn't specify that exactly what a power weapon was. So mastercrafted Thunderhammers galore. and now it's restricted to sword, axe, maul, or lance. Now, it can be argued that why is your chaplain, why is there Crozius anything but a power maul? But I think it's a good change. Happy with it. Now, this is one that's caused a big stir next, is the can an independent character with bitter duty join a unit that doesn't have it? Yes. And this isn't a change, obviously FAQ, whereas the last one I'm sure was errata, really. So Moritats can join any unit. So actually my Elites video that I filmed just before I went away, before the FAQ, doesn't need to be redone. You can put Moritats in any unit. It's a big change from Heresy 1, where you had to put them only in destroyers. And I suppose this goes as well for the bullet point below. Independent characters can take a retinue that doesn't have bitter duty if they've got bitter duty. So I think it's Zephon has bitter duty, can still take a retinue. I do think it opens up some real nice opportunities for how you can run units, like even down to my idea for having despoilers with heavy chainswords in my Iron Warriors list. So I've got the +1 for my Iron Warriors, plus for heavy chainswords. Adding rag grenades to that is a bit of a it helps that unit out, and just there will be lots of combinations where getting that strength 6 threshold, adding a Moritat, will just really help. And really, I suppose, like, obviously they're loners, but I don't see anything rage-inducing with it other than we were used to it that way. There's nothing really intrinsically that you shouldn't be able to join that unit to that. It's just greater freedom in list building, and I'm never really against that. So, yeah, it's Moritats everywhere, please. Next, we go on to the Traitor book. Archaean Force is basically done off. It specifies the leadership that you use for it, and it's a non-independent character. Debuff to Thousand Suns. I know they can go off if you pass all those leadership tests, but I'm still not convinced that they're the most brilliant faction ever, whether they needed a debuff. I'm not sure. Venom Spears, errated from Poison, which doesn't exist, to Poisoned. Excellent. Then we have the console upgrades in the FAQ that we had in the last one. And then a really, really big FAQ, which was actually an errata. So, does the Sons of Horus Merciless Fighters special rule come into effect on a turn when a disordered charge is made by a unit? And it does. So, that means that massively steps up the Sons of Horus special rules power. Previously, it was very defensive because you could hold the line and deny it. Now, I suppose previously it wasn't, because it was always that, because this is an FAQ, not an errata. But really, you could just deny it. Now they've got an offensive and defensive bonus, which doesn't come into it a lot with other legions which have a charge bonus. So say Blood Angels only goes off on the charge, that's why it couldn't be denied. World Eaters only goes off on the charge, that's why it can't be denied. And it's the same through any of the legions that get those things. Emperor's Children, the same, only on the charge. So I sort of could see why they left it out of Sons of Horus for their Merciless Fighters special rule. However, it just didn't translate across to tabletop, and what we now end up with Merciless Fighters is Merciless Fighters basically being the best of those special rules, because it's triggering all the time. And if someone charges into your unit that's already engaged, it triggers as well, because it's on the defensive. Am I super mad that Sons of Horus have got a very good Legion special rule? No, because I actually really like them being on the powerful side. Because they're the War Masters Legion, they're meant to be the best. when they got +1 to their ballistic skill within 12-inch range in Heresy 1, they went from being one of the worst legions, because the Merciless Fighters rule was terrible in Heresy 1 as well. They went from being one of the worst to one of the best. And it's basically happened again, at least on the generic traits side of it. And I'm not mad at either time that's happened. I think it's a really good change, definitely warranted for the Suns. And I'm really happy for you, Phil. So next we get onto something that affects Iron Warriors. Can a bolter upgrade, like a chain sword, a chain bayonet or a bayonet, be applied to a shrapnel bolter? Or other such thing? No. They lose their bayonet lugs, right? It's the only possible thing. When they were manufactured, they went, bayonet lugs, no, we don't want them on our short range bolters. Bit of a weird one, but like, oh, how much do I talk about bayonets on a shrapnel bolter? I'm sure everyone doesn't want to hear me go on about bayonets on a shrapnel bolter. I would have quite liked them on there, but this was probably the easy way out without basically erratering a load of Legion and generic unit rules. So next we get another Iron Warriors one. We get, when an Iron Warriors vehicle unit makes a shooting attack as part of a return fire, basically a strength 6 weapon could become offensive because of the +1 strength when targeting a walker or vehicle. So I would say, obviously it's in the FAQ section, it was +1 strength to the strength of the attack, not strength to the weapon, so it's just clearing up that. What is a good question in the rules? It could bump that weapon's strength up. They could have very easily been a yes in the answers column. But I think it's the correct way for it. I mean, who's mad at my heavy bolters firing as defensive weapons? Not many people. So next they clear up to the armature unit type. Basically, armature unit types are affected by Haywire Detonation, Armor Bane and Battlesmith as if they were dreadnoughts. Great change. I think we all knew it should have been that way. It felt weird that it wasn't because they are obviously machines. Sadly, it doesn't specify like Legion special rules in there, so Iron Warriors just still not getting your +1 strength against armatures. A bit annoying, but an all-night house, you don't need to complain that much about it. And if it's just a couple of armatures, it's just something us 4th Legion players are going to have to bear. So next in the Mechanicum FAQ errata, we've got, can a unit with Paragon subtype make reactions? No. I think this is just meaning, does that override Cybernetica type that can't make reactions? Because Paragon actually lists that they can fire weapons while making reactions. So I think that's what it's meaning. It's a bit of a weird side of it to come down. Like, I do think Paragon units should be able to react, especially with having Cyberthurgy taken off Mechanicum, where other units won't be able to like chain down with Cyberthurgy to allow reactions. It's a bit of an odd side to come down. Paragon units are still quite good and worth taking though. But yeah, just a bit of a weird one for the Mechanicum here. Next we'll get onto the Legacy units basically. Now, there's a couple of changes to, God, what's it called? The Liber Imperium book. Now, I'm not a massive expert on Sisters of Silence, and those were the main changes, and I'm pretty sure the only changes in the Liber Imperium book. So I'm going to leave that out for now, and when I visit Sisters, we'll include that with whoever I'm doing it with, or when I've educated myself on Sisters, I'll include that within the Sisters rundown. There has been changes in the Militia pack, or change in the Militia pack, to the Void Jumpers, and it wasn't a big change, not nearly the changes that I think were needed in the Militia Legacies document, but I suppose at least it sort of shows that they're looking at these Legacy documents, maybe not in great detail in some places, but we actually got quite a good set of changes for the Legacies pack in general, for Marines at least. Now, I've selected some generic ones as well as a couple of Legion specific changes that I think are going to have either the most impact or made me happiest on the inside. So Legion attack bikes got a drop in price to 45 points each, gained an extra wound and an extra attack. Just makes them a much more palatable choice than what they were previously. Now, 2 wounds at 45 points, 3 up save, then makes them comparable to a jet bike when you think they've got heavy bolters for free, they've got chainswords, 2 attacks. That's good. Like, it just makes them a much more comparable choice to other counterparts that are very similar. Essentially, for 30 points, you could get a jet bike that's got 1 attack and moves 16. So these aren't on a par with jet bikes, but they're in a much better place than they're in a better place than they were. Maybe not much better, but they're in a better place than they were, especially with the 2 wounds. Yeah, much better. They've got 2 wounds now. So still not the best option. However, for anyone with bike armies, more variation into there is definitely a welcome change. And honestly, Iron Warriors with sidecars, I'm really thinking about it now. Next, we have Tarantula Sentry Guns for 40 points each. They gained Fearless and can make Interceptor advanced reactions. Is it the biggest changes in the world? No. Obviously, they had a points drop to 40 points. Are they still worth it? No, but heading in the right direction. Like, just tighten that screw a bit more, get the points down. Like, the BS is still far too terrible, though he's got some, like, the opportunity to get, like, spikes because they've got, or I have them with las cannons, so 3 would have 6 las cannons. So even though they're BS2, you could always spike and get, I don't know, like, go crazy and maybe even get 3 hits. So still not the best, but heading in the right direction. Terminator and Indomitor squads, they didn't get any changes to the base rules. Obviously, like, in my Terminator video, I was just like, they are the best generic Terminators. They stay that way, I would say. They've still got loads going for them. They've just got to change their Pride of the Legion in that they lose support squad in Pride and gain line when taken as compulsory troops, when I'm sure it was just taken as troops before. So that's really good. A debuff to something that needed a debuff. And I can't really see a problem with it. If Cataphracti and Tartarus need to be the compulsory troops, if veteran squads need to be the compulsory troops to gain line, Indomitus surely needed to be as well. Next, we've got, basically, this is the page for the Avenger, but also there's the Thunderbolt on the page below. It's just not worth flagging up both of them. They both got a price drop, both to 150 points. They both do slightly different jobs, but the price drop is nice. Planes haven't been having the best time of it. Like, my 2 Thunderbolts for Solar, I'd say get shot down about 75% by interceptor reactions. So it's just nice to see the points going down to make it more worthwhile giving it a chance and taking them. The Heavy Stubber on the Avenger as well got reduced. Had Skyfire taken off it, so it can actually fire at ground targets that it can hurt, because it's only got strength 4, so couldn't hurt anything in the air. So that's a good change. The Cestus, now this is a really good change. The transport capacity went to 16, Misericord basically allows any Terminator unit to charge when they disembark from the Cestus. You can still transport other units in there, they just can't charge when they disembark. Now, it's a bit weird because the transport capacity they could have just made it so that it had assault vehicle, transport capacity 10, a misery cord, like previously could have made it so that bulky models count as normal. Whichever way round it comes, at least it's now a usable. I'm still not gonna say good. At least it's now a usable Terminator transport for assaulting with. Also, it's got a change to a Magna Melter cannon, which is better than the Melter array that was on there before. So, good changes. I'm sure Phil's happy about that, even if he's not. Even if he's a Heresy player, so he's going to complain about how they've gone about it exactly. Malcadors gain independent fire control. Still very slightly on the expensive side. I mean, they like sort of 45 points more than a Rus with less armor value. Yes, they've got 1 more HP, but they've now got, with the independent fire control, the ability to just play around with what they're doing a bit more. It might be worth a bit more of a look in for the actual, like for the tank in Legions lists, because it gives you another sort of like mid-level tank just to play with. Is it the best option in the world? No. Is it a really cool looking tank? Yes. So just gaining something that benefits it a bit more in independent fire control is a definite plus. Now, I was going to go past it, but independent fire control, it is a plus. Whether it needed to have the first... So basically you fire at your primary target, resolve that, including any return fires, so you could take damage and then not be able to fire further. Then any weapons that haven't fired at the primary target can fire at a secondary target, but suffer a -1 to hit modifier as well. Whether it needed that -1 to hit, I don't know. I don't think so. And it would have been nice for that not to suffer the effects of return fire before it fired at the second target. But again, I'm happy that it's got something. Like, that's why I was sort of pausing on saying the negative bit about it, because it's going in the right direction. And do you know what? Overall, as we go to the next units, I'm happy with the way this FAQ and errata has gone, even if I'm not happy exactly with how everything has changed. I'm happy the direction that it's been taken in. So Legion Super Heavy tanks, which I constantly complain about, have all got a points reduction. Again, whether it's far enough, I don't know. So like, just, I'm on the Baneblade page. The Baneblade cannon is still terrible. I wouldn't be paying 650 points for it. Is it better than it being 750 points? Yeah, it's like a 7th better. So it's definitely headed in the right direction. And I genuinely now really don't mind things going in the right direction slowly rather than massively overcompensating and then getting something massively wrong in the other direction. And with that, we'll get onto Fulham and Horus. And do you know what? I didn't plan out the order of these, but Fulham and Horus don't exist anymore, right? So there is lots of spicy memes on the internet at the start of December when this FAQ dropped about Fulham and Horus being abandoned by all Alpha Legion players. And essentially they got like a double nerf. So you have a Patriarch Targeter that can be swapped for a power weapon, so you can't have both. Meaning that you don't have the option to get their special targeting rules along with having combat power like, say, Tyrant Siege Terminators. That was far too long of a pause for me as an Iron Warriors player. You don't have the option of being a combat, like, a combat monster, as well as having your shooting attacks being really good. So that gives tyrants a place, so I'm going to forever stop, or I say forever, until Fulminataris get better again, I'm going to stop complaining about tyrants not being as good as them. Because this FAQ definitely did it. So the Patriarch's Targeter may activate it at the start of the controlling player's turns, may not move, but gains night vision and twin linked on their shooting attacks. So you now can't fire from out of line of sight like they used to be able to. Twin linked is nice, obviously, but it's on a BS5 platform, so they didn't really need it. But obviously it softens the blow of losing shooting out of sight. Now, the real big difference to Fulminataris is the change to the Hellfire Plasma Missile. I mean, the Splinter Missiles changed very slightly, but really, the Hellfire Plasma Missile, it gained 12 inches of range, but Strength 7, AP 4, Heavy 1, Breaching 4 up isn't anywhere near the Strength 8, AP 2, Brutal 2 that it was. Did we see this coming? Yes. Did we see it as harsh as it is? Probably not. Like, it's not as good as even as a plasma gun, I would say, anymore. Like, it's taken up a Terminator platform, so that's obviously more sturdy. They can be made into troops choices, I suppose, because they're an elite Terminator unit rather than a heavy support like Tyrants. So they can be made into troops choices, which would be rage-inducing. But it's a bit sad to see them fall that far. Like, I've got a unit of 10 that I'm going to be painting on Saturday when I go and see Miles. They will definitely be getting game time. But it would have been nice to have one game when they were in their heyday. It was definitely needed. I'm not mad at this change at all. In fact, it makes me happy on the inside as an Iron Warriors main. So next we have the Loctara Storm Squad. They go up in points to 190 points. This, I think, is a change that was needed as well. All of the benefits that they got as a jump pack 2-up save infantry with their Blade of Wisdom special rule for getting the +1s to hit at weapon skill 5 as well. It did make them pretty insane. So it's a really good change, I think. Nothing to complain about there. Again, I've got a squad behind me about to be painted, so we'll see whether they're still worth the points very soon. And actually, that is it at the end of this FAQ. So next we go on to the Solar Auxilia Legacies list. We've got the first change coming in the form of the Solar Macarius Heavy Tank Squadron, where the battle cannon goes to 48-inch range, Vanquisher to 72. Basically, my opinion of them hasn't really changed, because 300 points for the platform, the front armor 13 being traded off against 6 hull points, I don't think works. I think it needs to be armor value 14 on the front. Yes, that's like a Rust, but it feels like an expensive Malcador at the moment with less weapons. And Malcadors, I don't think, like in the Legions list with the secondary weapon change, they're getting there, but I still don't think it's the most competitive. I like the unit, but I don't think it's the most competitive. Macarius are then one step further more expensive, and with worse weapons in the form of the heavy stubbers. So next we got the Stormblade, 650 points, rather than 750. Again, this is one of the only super heavies that I even really considered taking, because I've got one for my Solar. It never really got his points back, but whether or not that was because I rolled abysmally with my scatter dice every time I used it. Like, so it's going in the right direction. It's getting more worthwhile, and I was already taking one on occasion. So I think it's a good change, and definitely a needed change for the super heavies in everywhere, basically. All of them needed a points reduction, and they've got it. Basically, 100 points down on all of the super heavies. No other changes to those super heavies. The Praetor has gone to Massive Blast 7, which is a good change. 500 points, though, for one shot a turn. Yes, it's Massive Blast 7, but when we compare that to an Arquiter, it's like 2.5 times more expensive, off the top of my head, with pretty much the same profile. So still not worth it on that one, sadly. The Crassus, points decreased to 300 points. Absolutely beautiful model, as well as the Praetor. But with no assault transport. It would have been really nice to have an assault transport for Solar, and maybe that could have been fulfilled by the Crassus. But without that, it's Auroch spam all the way, I think, is still the way to go. And that's the end of the Solar lists. So that brings us to the end of the FAQs and erratas. Overall, I think the FAQ and errata is a positive for the game. As I've said about halfway through this video, I like the way it's going. Whether or not some of the changes are the exact changes I would make, they're definitely not. But it's addressing some of the concerns that I had with the game. And that's all the rules writers can do. They're not in any of our heads. That's all they can do. Now, what else would I like to see in an FAQ errata sort of situation? Go on, Pete, I'll bite. The thing that I would really like to see in an FAQ errata is I would like to see changes to Thunderhawks. I would like to see an addition where Thunderhawks are really valuable and good. Because in my memory, there hasn't been one yet. So if you know one where Thunderhawks have been really killer, leave it in the comments, because I can't remember one, and I would love for an edition where Thunderhawks are just absolutely baller. I wouldn't care if they just wrecked face. I just want them to be really good, because it's the iconic Marine thing to me. Other than like hordes of Marines like running across the front of books in the Heresy, the Thunderhawks are just ever present. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget all to do the YouTubey things, as well as there being a Patreon link below where you can support the channel that little bit more and get yourself dice, access to the Discord, ad-free videos, early releases, so long as I keep up with everything this year. And with that, I'll close it out. Hopefully you enjoyed my late FAQ and errata video. Hopefully it was worth doing. And I'll catch everyone next time in a bit.